wa barakatuh. On behalf of NNST, my name is Binta Diop and I am a founding member of the Ndawi Serigne Touba. Today I bring greetings from our Jawrin Serigne Josimbai, the board of director of Jawrin of Ndawi Serigne Touba, but also from all the Muslim Murid youth living in the United States of America. So much for such a wonderful, a great discourse and a great presentation about the Ndawi Serigne Touba. I strongly believe that this is quite honestly the greatest gift we can give to a youth movement, especially putting it in writing, but also giving us such details about how we came about as young Murids. As you were speaking, I think one thing that really caught my attention was the fact that you did mention that the Ndawi Serigne Touba did have an identity that was transnational, but also the pluralism that we could see in our movement. I can tell you that the beginning, our movement mentioned that so beautifully in your article. We came about really out of a need. This is something that was bigger than ourselves. I think the time where on July 23rd, 2017, when we met at the Central Park, Morningside Park for our barbecue, it was our soul yearning to be in touch with Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. I think the time is very small for me to elaborate on how we were able to display our thirst for the Murid Tariqa here in the United States. But I also wanted to really mention that NST, the Ndawi Serigne Touba, has a very particular side that I'm inviting everyone to pay attention to. And that's the platform that Ndawi Serigne Touba for the Muslim woman herself. With our community, with our organization, very early on given a platform to the woman in our society. We were part of the board membership, we were part of the decision making. But another aspect of NST is the social aspect of NST, where NST became a safe place, not just for peacemaking. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because Amba is the pinnacle of the embodiment of peace all over the world. However, we were able to embody that through our activities. And the example you gave with that man being shot is how we are living that peace on a daily basis. I owe our attention to the way that we are forming new lives. In NST, we see that with our activities, we were able to decrease unmarital interrelationship, if you will say. In NST, we were very successful into making the young people meet and get married and build the health. Within NST as well, we were able to build models. I need to remind, I am compelled right now to remind everyone that NST is really a model and a good service, not only for Senegalese Murids, but for American, because most of the youngest may be around 12, the oldest you may see somewhere old. However, most of them are US citizens. These are the future leaders of America. And having the principles and the teachings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba in the 20th century, right now with the world where Black Lives Matter, we are struggling for Black men. We are struggling to end the violence in New York. We are struggling to find a meaningful way to work. NST came through as an answer, and not only for the Murid community, but for the world as a whole. And I'm very grateful that we were able to show our progress through the article that Mr. Jonathan did with the help of MICA, the Murid Islamic community in America. I think before I end to say that, yes, we do have concern within, and its concern is really to have the resource. But our Jawrin, which is Serigne Josimbai, along with the board, shown the way. And the way that NST operates is really the words of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, where he said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So what we did is we took lines and we started creating avenues of development even before anybody got involved. Blessing for us to see that the minute we rose up, the elders came and gave us their stamp of approval. The minute we got up, we were able to see that Sheikh Serigne Mamour came and gave us his stamp of approval. So now NST is into a bigger platform. Sure, in the future of Muridism, according to us and into our own eyes, is how can we develop the Murid exponentially? How can we make Muridism in America a cause, which is creating an international university where all youth can identify in there and be able to do the true sense of khidmah, which is learning the westernized way of education, but applying also the teaching of the Sheikh and creating that bridge. So I think part of both teachings. Another of our future endeavors also has to do with really creating safe spaces. I think, Mr. Jonathan, you touched upon that a little bit by saying that when we have the dara and we create that safe place for people, it's a means for us to create better peace. That at this time, NST definitely needs more of those safe spaces. I think one of our challenge is really how can we recognize that NST, most of our members are American citizens, and how can we make reservations for those US citizens, for those Americans, so that they can benefit from, like, let's say, like recreational centers, places where they can stay so that they can live the true identity of who they were born to be. I want to monopolize the discussion, but we are extremely grateful for this opportunity. We do thank Mika for this opportunity. For the support that we have received. Mr. Diouf, thank you so much for having us. And Mr. Jonathan, again, we are extremely appreciative. On behalf of all the members of the Ndawi Serigne Touba, we are thankful and we say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we pray for our Sheikh Serigne Muntaha for a long life for him, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much, Peter Diop. I think that you added to Jonathan's presentation and you engage with some of the issues he raised. In particular, I think you gave us a kind of very powerful picture of the mission, NST members assign themselves. And again, the question you are raising, which resonates very well with what Jonathan was saying, is how do you inscribe Murid resources in a landscape where you have other groups, other values, other religious understanding. And in particular, what you insisted on is about a kind of American citizenship which is informed by a tradition which is not a Western tradition, by a Muslim tradition which is also different from, quote unquote, the kind of global Muslim tradition. And I think that it's an important discussion to have also beyond the Murid community, because it's not, as you say, only about the Muslim community. It's about West Africans, it's about Muslims, it's about making the lesson of Ahmadou Bamba important and more important in the world scene. But one thing you intersect, the three of you, is your insistence on peace. And my question is, why such an insistence on peace? Because peace is but one aspect of Ahmadou Bamba's teaching. Is not the whole teaching of Bamba. Again, Sheikh Babu insists much more on the pedagogical aspect and think that it is the heart of Ahmadou Bamba's intervention. I think these are questions around which we could open the floor and give the possibility of our colleagues to intervene before going back to Jonathan. The two previous panels, and I think this one, which is exploring the future of the Muridiyya in the US, and in particular paying a lot of attention to Nawisarin Touba, which is the youth movement of Touba, is really fitting. This discussion is a follow-up of the discussion because it's about looking at what are the lessons of Ahmadou Bamba and how we are carrying it, and carrying it in particular in a space which is different from the space in which not only it's emerged, but the space in which it's developed. So what the panel is going to interrogate is the intersectional dimensions of immigration, African ethnicity and identity, Blackness and religion. And is about really how religiosity and what people have learned, in particular the parents, are traveling here, and how it is shaping the identity of which second generation, not only Murids, but of West African. It's about home, it's about ethnicity, it is about religion. So, and the presentation will be given by Jonathan Bowman, who is a PhD candidate from Middlesex University in London. And I think that we'll have also a presentation and comment by Mohamed Galayai and by Hadim Bousso. And after that, we will open the discussion. So what I would like to do is to give the floor to Jonathan to give his presentation. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to everyone, everywhere. I really want to thank all the organizers for inviting me to participate in celebrating Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba Day in North America. Great privilege. I'm also just want to greet the esteemed members of this panel, and I really look forward to your contributions. Before I begin, just a few words about myself. Many of you know me. I'm a disciple of Jesus. I work as a consultant for Christian-Muslim relations. From 1999 to 2009, I lived and worked in Senegal. More recently, I've done my research in Harlem. I just want to say thank you to all the people that helped me, housed me, fed me, answered my questions, and made me feel really welcome. I love the New York Murid community. And on the subject of this, this particular panel, I would say right off the top, the future is bright for Murids. And so my presentation really is going to come in that light. The Ndawi Touba Facebook page says they are a religious organization aimed at spreading the work of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, Khadimur Rasul, through events, community support, community service, and peer support. The president of NST described their mission to me as dawah to lost African youth, and that they would find a way to become useful, productive citizens by following the example of Bamba. NST really burst onto the scene in New York in the 2017 Bamba Day parade when they wore matching uniforms and served the community. And I'm having trouble with my notes. Ndaw means either youth or ambassador. And in the case of NST, they're quite deliberately meaning both. They're young ambassadors of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. Calling themselves youth, they position themselves in society, and really it's about leading a counter discourse. Living in the diaspora, they experience freedoms that they would not have in Senegal, and they escape some of the control of family and society structures and live in a new geography. I'm quoting Dr. Juf. In America, they're Murids by choice, and they describe themselves as sometimes being victims of racism and violence. At the same time, they're positioning themselves in their local context and attempting to lead a counter discourse about being young Muslims in America. Many of NST members are elites with American college degrees. Oh my, I'm having so much trouble with this mouse. Pardon me. Yes, my mouse was giving me trouble. NST was birthed out of intergenerational tensions. And the idea of youth as a social shifters might clarify the situation of NST and their context within the Muridiyya and the larger society of New York. They're aware of power differences between them and their elders, between them and Mika, between themselves and American society. And they're creating ways to tip that imbalance just a bit in their favor. They do this by being the best Murids they know how, serving to the greatest extent, and winning a place for themselves. By creating a youth movement with enough momentum and energy, they gained attention from Sheikh Mamour, and they've moved themselves as youth from being undesired to desired. So I'm going to talk a lot about the kind of shifts that they've created. And by seeing them as social shifters, it's a kind of a powerful analytic tool to interrogate the ways that they point out imbalances and bring awareness to things hidden. They're situated in a very dynamic context, and their position allows them to see opportunities that the first generation of Murids may not have seen. They're ready to cross boundaries and mediate contradictions about being Sufi Muslim youth in a pluralistic and non-religious world. I could talk a lot about transnationality and locality. It's present throughout this discussion, but I'll just note that NST is a transnational religious organization, but they're locally rooted in Harlem. So issues of transnationality and locality are sharply in play. Tensions between Touba and Harlem, between Senegalese Wolof cultural forces and American cultural pluralistic realities of Harlem are shaping Murid youth. NST is a daira, and Momar Kumba Diop described three purposes for the daira: to serve the needs of the sheikh, to serve the needs of the talibé, and to promote Murid ideology. So using these three categories, I'm going to look briefly at NST. First, the needs of the sheikh. The daira helps this communication happen. Understanding the Sheikh-Talibé relationship is important to understanding NST. This is completely on display, say at the JFK International Airport, where NST members joined other Murids to welcome Sheikh Mamour, and who's also had multiple private meetings with them. The second role of the daira is to meet the needs of the Talibé, who live scattered across the city in an often hostile environment. For young Murids in New York, the daira offers community and belonging. For many members, NST is the primary circle of relationship and belonging in New York. They place a high value on helping newcomers get started in the community. By sharing food and housing and many other things, they create a Murid space, a place of belonging and safety and security, which I've discovered in my own research is probably one of the more significant things. This communal space where you feel secure, you know what your identity is, becomes a social mechanism for peacemaking, because it's out of that security that you have the ability to then relate to the religious other or the non-religious other. A third function of the daira is to promote Murid ideology, and NST members express this in three primary ways, I would say: khidma, dawah, and living the Yonu Jam. Yonu Jam I translate in my research to mean nonviolence or path of peace. First, khidma. This is the most visible element of NST. You see them serving the community at events, organizing, cleaning up, preparing food. And as you know, service to one's sheikh and service to one's family and fellow Murids and society is really the essence of being a Murid, because by doing that service, you're serving khidmatul khadim, and thus you're in the service of the Prophet. So NST has focused a lot of its activity in that realm. Sociologically speaking, you could say that NST members are using their bodies as weapons or tools. By dressing in matching uniforms, they insert themselves into the middle of the most important events in the Murid community: Bamba Day, the Magal, And this causes everyone to recognize them and value them as ambassadors of Sering Touba. Dawah. NST carries a strong sense of dawah. And I've experienced a warm, compelling invitation to become a Muslim every time I was with them, to join NST, join the Murids in New York. Their president described dawah as their first and foremost mission to lost Senegalese, but including all people, Muslim and non-Muslim. He said, we have an example of the forgiveness of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, whose example shows us how we should live, and so we desire to share that with others. It appears to me that their commitment to dawah is stronger in NST than in Mika Murid community in general. NST members adhere to Murid tradition, and at the same time they bring a critique. They believe that as a new generation with different opportunities, education, the benefit of their parents' work, they can take the Muridiyya to new levels of success. So dawah and conversion are core parts of NST's mission. And I would say they feel that the older generation has not understood or integrated into the American context sufficiently to have such an effective witness. And nonviolence. A third way that NST promotes Murid ideology is the way they live Yonu Jam. Nonviolence is an essential part of Murid ideology, and in New York, a chosen public identity for the New York diaspora. It makes a lot of sense in the context of New York and the American situation. During Ramadan 2018, an NST member was shot in the stomach just outside Daraji on 116th Street. This event and the way people talked about it has been very instructive to me. I got to see how people wrestle with a violent event as faithful Muslims and as faithful disciples of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba. The victim emphasized that he was trying to calm people down, trying to stop a fight. He got shot, but that was something God allowed to happen. So that kind of removes the need to blame or seek revenge. And the communal response to this act of violence appears to have been to trust that the police will do their jobs and to pronounce forgiveness, calling on the example of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba. And additionally, in the community meetings I've seen and the talk I've had with many people I've interviewed about this, the question isn't so much about who was this person or why did they commit this act of violence, but it's much more an internal question. Why? How could have our young people got in such a troubling situation, and how could we get them to join NST? So Murids of NST members, I mean, in Harlem are living into this narrative of being nonviolent Muslims with a witness to offer to others. How would I define an American Murid? You know, it's like, how would you define an American Christian? And in one sense, I want to say, well, we are purely Christian. We are, that's separate from being American. But the reality is, when I travel to other countries, I meet Christians in Africa, and they behave and act differently than I do. And so when I say American Murid, I'm saying it's not something about changing Islam in its core, but it's how do American Murids live that's different than maybe their brothers and sisters in Senegal. So the emergence of an American Muridiyya is not what I was expecting to find when I did my research in Harlem. I was really just looking for Senegalese people living in New York City, and maybe how they remain true to their origins. Young Murids in NST with a portion of their education in Senegal and another port in the United States know that they're no longer immigrants, no longer migrants, I mean. They want to and intend to make their life in New York, Atlanta, or Columbus. They're Americans. And as Murids, Touba's still their permanent cardinal north of the spiritual compass, but their everyday concerns are oriented towards life and work in New York City, not Senegal. So I characterize American Murids as those who are American citizens by birth or naturalization, who went to high school or university in the States and are fluent in English. These American Murids thrive in a transnational space that's oriented spiritually towards Touba, but settled in America. They're 100% committed to Bamba. They possess the ritual mastery and skills needed to transform and adapt Murid ritual to American context. They carry a very strong JN, Sheikh Abdullah J. They carry quite an influence from him in terms of how they approach their religious life in America. They want to make Bamba known everywhere, share his spiritual and ethical philosophy. They engage in khidmah, dawah, and peacemaking. So to conclude, NST has chosen to work from within the Murid community, to utilize traditional Murid structures and rituals, faithfully adhering to the teachings and practice of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba. There are challenges and growing pains ahead, but it's clear that these young ambassadors of Sitting Touba are shifting the position of Murid youth in Harlem and beyond. Their clothing, their use of religious objects to announce their presence to all. They use their bodies to serve their community and to claim contested spaces. In all these activities, they call attention to things they would like to change, things they think could be done better. Young ambassadors of Sitting Touba have shifted both their position in the community and the community of themselves, itself. They've moved from being non-participants to participants, from no leadership to leading and founding their own new daira. They've changed dynamics about how, Sheikh Mamour, when he comes to New York, he doesn't just meet with the older traditional dairas. Now he's meeting with the youth as well. They've moved from being unofficial to official. They have a 501c3 organization, and they're pressing into a much more aggressive and strong invitation to Islam and to being Murid. Any visitor in the community will experience that. The young ambassadors of Sitting Touba continue to hold to Murid commitments to peace and nonviolence. And the ways they live and express this commitment to nonviolence is a strong element of their life as Murids. They're participating in the Murid witness that Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba was a Muslim peacemaker. But this rests in somewhat of a tension with their strong call to dawah. And how will they balance this peacemaking and a rather aggressive, sometimes aggressive witness? So Murid youth in New York are seizing their place in the larger New York diaspora. They're youth who are negotiating what it means to be faithful Muslims, faithful Murids, and Americans. Their ancestors shaped most of the last 40 years of the Murid presence in New York, and now they're going to shape the next season. Thank you, and I turn it back to you, Dr. Juf.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So he has presented a very rich paper, which is a kind of sociology, but also an understanding of the emergence of what he called, an American Muridia, and has actually signaled very precisely the manifestation of such an identity, which is a new identity in the space, which is in particular the space of.
Well, thank you. I really appreciated the presentation from Serin Khadim Bousso and from Binta Jup. Both of you, your contributions really added to what I had already shared. The question, why peace? Why did we all focus on peace? Very, very important, because in Senegal, peacemaking and nonviolence would not be a major emphasis of Murids. However, living in post 9/11 New York City, I believe Murids had to find a way to make themselves fit into an American society that was suddenly very hostile towards Islam and hostile towards Muslims. And they dug into their tradition and they find that they actually have a very powerful, long-standing witness about nonviolence from their founder. So embracing it makes perfect sense. And the other thing I want to say about Binta, your presentation, I also am very impressed at the role that women have played in NST. I've interviewed some of the women. I've seen your contributions, and so that's a very unique thing you bring as a daira and as a space for women to present themselves to and their gifts to the world. Might I add one more thing before I pass the mic over, and that is to say, I really have enjoyed researching the NST. Wow. Because you actually do have a contribution to make to American society. So you're gifted with two cultural heritages, and you're well-educated people. And right now, American society has a lot of questions about whether or not immigrants are welcome, whether or not they have an important role to play. And so highlighting something like peace and nonviolence, highlighting a Muslim group that has a place for women in leadership, means that you have a very attractive and interesting contribution to make to the larger American society. I'll stop there.
I was saying that the message of Sir Ahmadu Bamba is universal. The nationality of the founder of the Muridiya is universal, as the message of Islam in his many writing and teaching lessons. Like he said, "Inni ukhatibun nasara turran fi ardihim." I will speak to them in their own land. I will explain them the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the message of Allah is peace and love. The reason, one of the reasons why when Syekh Ahmad Bamba returned from the exile to his land, he said, I forgive everybody, because I don't want to do wrong to people. The reason why we are, as a Murid in Harlem, we bring peace to the community. Even the white American and the black American and the African American, they know that the message of Syekh Ahmad Bamba is peace and love and gathering together and make the things clear and nicer and call people to Islam nicely. Don't do wrong to people. Even they are not Muslim, you have to respect them, to give them respect, to call them to Islam. The reason why, one of the reasons, most of people or many people, they every day returning to Islam, following the teaching of Syekh Ahmad Bamba by the Sheikh of Touba, Touba. One of the reasons the Murid Dawah is right now is the most dawah, the real dawah of Islam, because it's calling people to practice Islam by peace and love. This is what I was wondering to add again, and to remind the Nawi Touba that what I mentioned before. Firstly, they are lucky because they was born Muslims and they was born American citizens, so they don't have a language problem. They don't have anything they don't have excuse to presenting and explaining the teaching of Syekh Ahmad Bamba. So they have to work hardly to bring people to Islam, but by peace and love, as I mentioned before. This is what I was wondering to add to my presentation lately. Thank you.
I think I have a question for Mr. Jonathan, but before I proceed, I think it's very important for also to share the support that we've received from Serigne Khadim Bousso, who was an imam in New York at the time where we were when we were organizing, and also the elders of the community. So I just wanted to mention that before I proceed, because I forgot. But for Mr. Jonathan, I have a question, and my question has to do with what sparked the interest of your study for NST. In what sense did you see us different from other youth movements, Islamic youth movements per se? You know, there are so many varieties of youth movements in the United States, you know, that are Muslim. But what makes the particularity of NST in your eyes?
So I was doing research on the Murid community, doing research on nonviolence, asking whether or not there are Muslims who practice nonviolence. And just simply, I was doing that research starting in 2016. So NST was created and came into being in the middle of my field work. And I had the blessing of meeting some of the leaders early on. And then you all, like you and many others, welcomed me into your midst. And I found you living out what your tariqa says you should do. And so it made it interesting to focus on you.
My follow-up question is, what do you think in the future, what we can do, as you mentioned before, to say Bamba everywhere? And what do you think is the meaning of Bamba everywhere?
So myself, you know, as a dedicated Christian, I want Jesus to be known everywhere, right? But obviously almost everybody in the world's already heard that name. So I don't just mean the name, right? I want to see people living and acting the way he wants them to act. So when I hear in the Murid community, when I hear people saying Bamba fi, Bamba fe, Bamba fip,
yes,
or quoting the verse from his poetry that you quoted, that they'll hear his teaching in their own language. My understanding is that Bamba everywhere, when NST members are saying that, is just very simply that many people would benefit from his teaching and follow his teaching about what it means to be a healthy, good person, a person in right relationship with God. I think that's what you mean, but you guys have to tell me, because I'm just listening.
That's what I mean.
But
I think with the Bamba FIP, Bamba FIB, Bamba everywhere, my understanding of it really as a young Murid is really the universality of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba's message, really. Because if you look at his writings, such as Sindi, if you look at the writings of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, where he says, Irham Jamiyar Wara, that universe has been taught by us, by our Sheikh himself. So he made reference to the Torah, he made reference to the Injil, he made reference to all the books. So us, as being true to the teachings of our Sheikh, we could no longer help but to bring the message everywhere, because that's the point of view of Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba as he was writing. Now, NST is an organization worldwide. We have people that are requesting to be a member in Saudi Arabia, in China, in Senegal. We have even non-Muslims that are part of sympathizing with our message. And I think what it shows over there is really shows that we were born within that context. And when it comes to our relationship with the Western world, my complete view about that is it's nothing new to us. And Alhamdulillah, I think we were able to beautifully highlight the two different, if we can call it that, which is two different lifestyles, which is the Murid lifestyle and the American lifestyle. But us being conscious and being here in the United States, in our mind, it's one and it always has been the same. And the reading I had that is just the situation where I saw our Sheikh Ahmadou Bamba, as we know him, completely lived with the Western man and the colonialist. All his writings, when you see, he's walking constantly in being accompanied by the Western man. So that is not a foreign concept for us. It's not a foreign concept for him to be in a foreign land and have to identify himself as a Muslim and as a Murid. So I think it's a continuation. Even now, it's just a different land for us, but the concept itself is not foreign. Even in Senegal, we do the same battle, where in Dakar, in a foreign land per se, because our teachings are not completely being implemented in Dakar. However, when we go to Touba, you can see us really fully embody the teachings of our Sheikh. So that lifestyle and the situation where we are, yes, it is something we can pay attention of, but consciously, wherever we go is Touba for us. Wherever we go, we are Murid, regardless of the situation. I think the real question, and probably Mr. Jonathan can help me answer that, is how can we get an awareness? How can we raise awareness of our situation as Murids? How can we be respected just being Murid citizens, Murid Americans, and not being seen as a different vague of people, a different kind of people? How can we be here and fully live our Muridism without being labeled or per se another type of American? Maybe he can help us find ways where we can be fully integrated within the American life and be recognized as such, inshallah.
I think young Murids are very eager to spread the teaching of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, and they're very proud of themselves. But sometimes I think they try to impose the wall of culture to new converts, be they Americans or Italians or whatever. And I think Murids, the Murids, which is based on true Islam, is cross-cultural. So I think maybe the youngsters should make more an effort to spread the teachings, but knowing that an American is an American. An American doesn't necessarily eat on the floor by his hand. I mean, these are like cultural things, and I think Islam goes beyond cross-cultural things. I mean, if you look at the what they call the Maqasid Sharia, the objectives of Islam, you realize that in any civilization, if you're from Jurbel, from Touba, from Sweden, or from America, you can be a true Murid, but using your own culture. I think there's an effort that needs to be made on that side.
I really liked Lamin's intervention. I think he makes a very important point. One I've observed over and over in my research is, for example, I witnessed a young African-American woman say the Shahada and join Islam and join the Muridiyah. But she doesn't speak Wolof. And at the event, every single aspect of the evening where she was, everything happened in Wolof language only, except for when the Imam made sure she understood what she was saying in the Arabic Shahada, and he repeated it for her in English. So how does a young woman like that become an active Murid if she doesn't speak Wolof and she doesn't know anything about Senegalese culture? So Lamin, you raised a very significant question.
Mr. Jonathan, thank you so much for, again, emphasizing that question. I think even us as youth, this has been also a challenge for us. And I'm glad that, we can see that you're paying attention to the same challenges. So it's a gleaming light for us as well. I remember one time, one of our goals was to have a lounge, like a Murid lounge, where it could be a place where we could just serve coffee Touba, have a big screen where people can come and watch the news, and just have our bean bags laying around, very informal. I think we were trying to kind of like bring our American side of it. A place where we don't have to come and be completely outside of our daily life of Harlem. And unfortunately, that goal we haven't reached yet. We are still trying. And it was a way for us to be able to unite all Murids. This is heartbreaking. It's a travesty when we see that the people that we really think that in the future will be carrying, will be the standard bearer of Muridism here, which are the Americans, we still have to face that challenge. So we are calling on our elders to really help us. We are doing in NST is that we have our website, which is ndawiserintuba.org, and over there we are trying to bridge, the gap, and hopefully we will be able to succeed in the coming years, inshallah.
Great scholars and ulama talking about our Sheikh Ahmad Bamba and his legacy of non-violence. I'm so happy to be with. First of all, I have to give a special thanks to Professor Sidi Ndiaye, who gave me this opportunity to participate in this debate. And I'm very happy also to be with Dr. Pirzada, whom I love a lot. because I have the opportunity to read his book about Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, how to say, epistemology of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. It's a good book, mashallah. And just I want to comment on his lecture in 2 points. First, the root of nonviolence in Islam. As Dr. Pirsada said, many people discuss the idea and the practice of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba of nonviolence, but in only one angle, whether politically or sociology or in other angle, but not in Islamic view and Islamic view of life. I think that the base of nonviolence of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba is rooted in, as Dr. Sheikh Babu said, in Islam teaching, in Islam religion. If we look at the Hayat al-Anbiya, if you look at the life and practice of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and his Sahaba, his companion, we see that they are the first who practice this nonviolence in their life. The Prophet himself, before he immigrated to Medina, he was prohibited to use weapons to defend from the attacking of the kuffar. He was ordered to follow a sabr. And if we read Quran, the ayat and verses that was revealed before the Al-Hijrah, we see so many verses talking about as-sabr and وَلَمَنْ صَبَرَ وَعَصَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, who practice as-sabr. He is one of the best of al-azm. And we see the Sahaba alayhim salam, alayhim ridwanullah, was persecuted during that time, and they was using sabr, patience, and never used weapon to defend against themselves. The Prophet himself was, when he go to Taif to seek for having support from people of Taif, he was badly treated there. They throw stone to him, and they mocked it at him. But when Jibreel came and told him that Allah, if you want to curse them and to send a punishment on them, they will disappear right now, and God will crush these two mountains on them. But the Prophet ﷺ forgive them and said, may Allah will bring some believer from their feet. So this is the practice of non-violence. And we see Al Yasir, some of the Prophet companions, they were persecuted, and some of them was killed, and they never use weapon. And even in the first one who practiced this non-violence is Habil. If we read Quran, we see that وَاتْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ نَبَأَ الَّذِي آتَيْنَاهُ Habil said to his brother Qabil, لئن بسطت إلي يديك لتقتلني ما أنا بباسط يدي إليك لأقتلك إني أخاف الله رب العالمين. If you want to kill me, I'm not wanting to kill you. Why? Because I have God-fearing. I'm God-fearing. I have fear of God, the Lord of the universe. إني أريد أن تبوء باسمي واسمك فتكون من أصحاب النار وذلك جزاء الظالمين. This is the first person who practiced non-violence. He was his brother wanted to kill him, but he never used weapon to defend himself or to kill the person who wanted to kill him. So Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, when he came to defend the interests of his people, he just practiced the teaching of Quran, the teaching of the prophets, and the teaching of Sayyidina Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. But the second point I want to say is that the characteristic of non-violence method of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, we have to put light on. The non-violence for Sheikh Ahmad Bamba doesn't mean to accept, to be humiliated, to be bad treated. Doesn't mean how to say a negative peace way of life, that you accept all bad things in your life without reacting. Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, as Dr. Pir Sada said, used the method of al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. And if we want to understand his method of non-violence, we have to read these qasida, Ya Jumlatan, qasida Ya Jumlatan, and Laysa al-Birru, and Ilhamu Salam, mainly in Ilhamu Salam. In this, and Qasidatul La Taj'alu Du'a ar-Rasul, and so many other qasaid in Fulkul Mashun. The qasaid he called Qasaidul Jihad, the qasaid of jihad. In these qasaid, you find that Sheikh Ahmad Bamba outlined and put a whole strategy of self-defensing, whether in the field of theology, the field of ideology or theology, moral and social and economic. Because khidma is one of his non-violence method. And I'll say, if you read Laysa al-Birru also, or Ya Jumlatan, we find that he put a whole strategy to fight against the influence of non-believer, the colonial French, by al-jihad bil-ulum bil-tuqa. He said, inni ujahidu bil-ulum bil-tuqa abdan khadiman wal-muhayminu shahidu. And he explained all the weapon, but not a physical weapon, but a spiritual weapon. He said, سيف الذي يفرط لا من ثلث توحيده. He used other weapon, that is tawheed, that is al-fiqh, that is tasawwuf, that is love of Allah, love of the Prophet, and living the true life of Islam. That, and I invite Dr. Pisada to read again all these qasaid, Laysa al-Birru, mainly Laysa al-Birru and Ilhamu Salam, and La Taj'alu Du'a ar-Rasul. And I think he can find a lot of theoretical and practical of the non-violence of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, inshallah.
Allah